Before I turn it over to Bob, we've got some housekeeping. First, I was requested by a good friend of mine to see if I could identify those in the audience or have them self-identify who are from Calgary. Calgary. Okay, if you are and you don't want to admit it, see Buzz. Okay, secondly, logistics. For those who are taking the course for credit, there are some things we need to go over. The materials, there isn't a lot of reading, but what there is, some of them are on Stellar because of copyright issues. There may also be on the website nutsandbolts.mit.edu. It's 3 units pass-fail. Because there's not a lot of reading, and a lot of what we're learning here is from people that have actually done it, one of the requirements for credit is you actually show up. And the TAs, in order to keep some track of that, are going to every day put in is it a Google form?
It's a bit.ly that goes to a Google form.
Bit.ly to a Google form, and you can go in there and you want to tell them what.
Don't tweet this out, only if you're here.
Yeah, if you're really desperate to get 3 units of credit by just falsifying the record, we've got bigger problems. But please do that, because what will happen, guarantee, I'll get an email a year and a half from now, I'm about ready to graduate, I never got the credit for the course. And so, okay, so bolts 0121. Okay, so every night there'll be a different one. And the other thing is a written requirement for the course. It's either an executive summary or a pitch deck. Usually it'd be best if it's an idea you're working on. And we're going to try to encourage team formation. But if you put together a team of 25 people, I'm going to be doubtful that all of you contributed to it. But we would encourage that. You'll get feedback on it, and we'll talk a little bit more. But again, 2 things. You've got to be here and a written requirement in order to get the credit. We'd like to encourage team formation. If you have a team, please send to nutsandbolts-ta@mit.edu to the TA saying who you are, who the team is. If you're having trouble finding a team, you can also send an email saying, I'm interested in X or Y or Z, and is there anyone looking for that? So we'll try to do that, and I'll ask them to think about other things. Maybe we can talk about it tomorrow night. Okay, any questions about logistics? Okay, then I'm on to Bob. Whoops. Why is this not moving? Oh, here we are. Is this moving? All right, well. Bob, I was going to.
This is the story of my life, Joe.
Yeah, well, I know. I was going to show that cool thing of you with your guitar, and why am I not seeing this? Okay. Yeah. Let's try it again. Got to see a picture of you with your guitar. All right, well, Bob plays the guitar. And I will turn it over to Bob. You want to introduce yourself? Bob was, for those at Sloan, is it called C function or consumption function? Yeah, and what does that consist of?
Different functions, like Chinese C function in African.
Okay, dancing. Here's the founder of the consumption function. I give you Bob Jones.
How many of you guys have no idea what we just talked about? Thank you. Many long years ago, Joe and I were classmates at Sloan, and it was kind of grueling, and they had something called Graduate Management Society, which was sort of like student council, and we had a treasury, and we weren't doing anything with it. And spring came, and I wanted a beer. And I had this idea that we should devote some of our treasury to the purchase of adult beverages. And I had been making my living as a guitar player, so I had an apartment full of amplifiers. I sent a note around saying, tired, frazzled, want a beer? And the response was positive. So I thought, well, I'll provide the music and we'll devote the treasury to beverages. And at the time, the upstairs part of the faculty club was still unused, and so I hustled them into letting us have a room, and we set out adult beverages and provided pizzas, and huge crowd showed up. Everybody drank themselves into oblivion, committed atrocities, and didn't surface until about Tuesday, and said, that was fun, let's do it again. So it kind of became a Thursday tradition, and the following year, I didn't bother to name it. I just would send something around saying, hey, we're doing it again. The following year, the class declared it the consumption function, which of course is an economics term, so it was a silly little pun. And it grew, and after a while, outfits like McKinsey were sponsoring it and bringing in food and using it as recruiting events, et cetera. And after a couple of years of this, the school grew uncomfortable promoting the overconsumption of adult beverages. And so the name got changed to the C function, and it's morphed since then. But it all started, I guess, because I wanted a beer. Why this? Why now? So I have one question for you before I dive into the substance, such as it is, of my talk. According to the poll that I read, about a third of you this evening have no connection with MIT. So special welcome to you. Would you be kind enough to raise your hand? All right, my question, thank you. How did you find out about this course? Because I don't think we're doing a very good job of promoting it. So how'd you hear about it? Alumni. And what did they tell you that caused you to decide to take it?
He told me that it was a great course, so it got me interested and we signed up.
True for the rest of you? Did you run it? Was it alumni? Was it somebody else? Yes, sir.
Karen Brandon at the School of Education at Harvard. She's a media lab grad and she just put it out there. I'm in the TIE cohort, so we're allowed to cross-register.
Cool. Well, you've been misguided. No, I'm kidding. Actually, I think the course has got a long history of being great. Were you going to offer? Were you going to say something? No? Okay. You're just finishing up your yoga exercise. So, yes, sir. Ah, all right. Okay, it doesn't surprise me if you're associated with the Institute that it would turn up someplace. But if you're outside the Institute and you found your way here, we're really glad to see you. I just wonder, how do we find you? Okay, I usually like to know who are you and what do you want, and I think we got some of that covered. In the course of my 75 minutes, I have this sort of quaint idea that if I'm going to ask you for your attention, I should try to deliver something of value in return. That's an old-fashioned notion. But I'm going to try and provide you a few hot tips on how you can find your customer and succeed with your business. And I'm going to illustrate those with a couple of anecdotes, product launches that I've been associated with. And we'll try to go from the specific to the general and extract some lessons out of all this. Okay? So, touch of background on me. I am currently in the process of exiting my fourth startup yes, well, that's why I look like I'm 107 years old. It's not an easy life. We make a 2.5-ounce drink that helps you sleep. It's based on just food ingredients, no side effects. If you're an athlete, you won't flunk a drug test, et cetera. And we've got a major CPG company that said, ooh, we're interested. So fingers crossed for us. Prior to that, I spent 4 years at a boutique consulting firm. I took over a soy foods company called Vitasoy, publicly traded in Hong Kong. That was a turnaround. Company had lost money for 23 years, which you can do if Grandpa in Hong Kong writes a check to his daughter and says, here you go, sweetie, you can continue to conquer America. One day, Grandpa died. The board said enough. There was nothing innovative about that. I fired about 75 people. It was a lot of just block and tackle work, but useful experience. Prior to that, I was associated with founding 3 other companies. I've had a couple normal jobs. I went to a couple schools, and the year that I made my living as a guitar player, before I came to Sloan, I said, I'm never going to stop playing, but this is just a god-awful way to make a living. And true to that promise, I've not stopped playing. We're playing again on Saturday night. Tomorrow night I'm leading a blues jam in the Concord Rod and Gun Club. It doesn't get any funkier than that. I also am a volunteer with a group that plays homeless shelters. And this is a place in Quincy where I played solo for a couple hours on Thanksgiving Day. We served about 700 people, and I called them up and I said, I know you have plenty of volunteers who will serve the carrots. Do you need a really nerdy guitar player to sit in the corner and serenade them? And they said, well, that's exactly the job description. Are you a guitar player? Yes. Are you really nerdy? Oh, yes. Oh, good. Come on in. So we were there. So this is a kind of a critical part of my life, my other life, if you will. Okay, some years ago, at the conclusion of previous recession, the Wall Street Journal said some companies survived and many did not. What can we learn from the ones who survived? And it turned out they fell into 2 buckets. There were those who became cost leaders and aggressively cut their costs. That's not you. And there were the innovators who focused on building a brand. And when you are associated with one of the elite institutions here in the Boston, Cambridge area, it's tempting to think that the problem is technological and the solution is technological. It's not necessarily true. There's a fundamental question, which is how's your end user not satisfied? So if there's 50 kids in town who want a bicycle and there's no bicycle shop, there's your opportunity. Okay? Keep that in mind, because sometimes what seem like the most pedestrian ideas lead to success. And I will make a bold assertion, which is that your business might get by, but it's not going to prosper until you know what you're really selling, who wants it, how do you find them. So I'm going to tick off some questions you should ask about your venture, particularly the 75 or 80 of you that are already involved in one. So what's the unmet need that we address? Said more colloquially, what's broke that we fix? Who cares? And by the way, that's not a rhetorical question. It's specifically, who cares? All right, I make a product for sleep. Everybody on the planet sleeps. Boy, is that a terrible business idea. The question is, who wants better sleep badly enough that they will pay me for it? Right? The answer turned out to be, as a launch market for us, competitive athletes, because we said better performance and better recovery through better sleep. Now, there are other markets that we will go into subsequently, unless somebody buys us. But those were fundamental questions for us. Who's trying to fix the problem? How many of them are there? How do you know they're going to spend money to solve the problem? Josh, I'm afraid I somewhat busted your chops on a variation of this question. How do I find them? Which was a question I asked Eric. How do I find them and let them know about us? How are they solving the problem now? And why will they think my solution is better than what they've been doing? I can't tell you how many times I have worked with really smart people at this fine place, and I ask them this question, and what I get is our algorithms are really sophisticated. Boy, I've got all this artificial, and sorry. Give it to me in 15 seconds. We've invented a way for people who have diabetes to check their blood glucose without having to stick a needle in their finger 4 times a day and bleed on a strip. Tell me more, right? And exactly who's going to pay me? Oh, Josh, I asked you that question. Can I make any money? Well, sad fact, if your business doesn't make any money, no matter how noble it is, you're not going to be around to continue delivering the benefit. Sidebar, how does that affect raising capital? Well, it's not widely spoken about, but one of the major fears that venture capitalists have is that they're going to invest in you and you're going to lose their money. And statistically, 9 out of 10 will. And you guys are smarter than the average, so maybe only 7 out of 10 of you will fail. But if I look and I say, well, my Aunt Millie died and left me a pile of money, and I'm going to put it to work. So I'm going to invest in you and you and you and you and you. And I know most of you will go down in flames, but maybe one of you will succeed handsomely. So how do I sort that out? Well, there's a non-negotiable requirement. You have to have customers. You don't have to be smart. You don't have to have money. You don't have to be good looking. If you've got customers, you'll look smart, you will make money, and if you make enough money, people will think you're good looking. Thank you. That's probably cynical. So, do you have any customers? Do you even know you need them? How are you going to get them? How much is each of them worth? How much does it cost? How many do you need? How long will it take you to get the number you need to be cash positive? And how much money do you need to fill the gap along the way? Make sense? Fundamental, often overlooked. So you should be able to assess your venture along 2 axes. Is it important? And is it unique? And obviously, the sweet spot is there. So, an example. Most of us will agree that air is important, arguably not unique. And I don't want you to burst into tears, but many of us would argue that MIT decals are unique, but may not be that important. So, can you build a business selling air?
Somebody did that.
Somebody did that.
Yeah, from UK, like, I think we had like fresh, from Ireland or Iceland somewhere, sell fresh air in China and India, like 7 bottles.
Okay, bottling fresh air and shipping it to China and India.
Yeah, somebody did that.
Bold. Yes.
And people sell water, which is also important but not unique. There's no reason.
I can't afford to go down that rabbit hole at the moment. I want to talk about selling air. Nice try. So, how many of you guys have ever gone scuba diving? Right. Well, I did my checkout dive off Catalina Island, California, and actually got down about 100 feet. And swimming through the kelp beds, sort of like an underwater redwood forest. And I looked at my little timer and thought, ooh, I would pay a lot for air right now, right? So there is an opportunity. Also, you guys know what bubble wrap is, right? That stuff, if you hand it to somebody, within 5 seconds, they're bursting all the bubbles, right? That company's called Sealed Air Corporation. And if I told you that you could make something for 8 or 9 cents and sell it for $5, you'd say pretty good business. But your mom and dad bought into that. Right? So I'm being a little bit facetious, but the point is, figure out who's going to want your offering, who's going to find it to be important and unique. Figure out how to find them, tell them what you've got, take their money. Okay, here's an example of a business I was involved with. Background. I was in Southern California working for a company. I was running the clinical nutrition business there. When I got involved, it was a $200 million company that had been doing $200 million a year for 12 straight years. And an entrepreneur bought them, took them private, fired most of the senior managers, brought in some people arguably with a bit more energy, and said, here's some stock for you, and here's some stock for you, and here's some stock from you. I want to grow this thing 50% in the next 3 years and take it public. And then you can buy a boat, and you can buy a plane, and you can buy another tuxedo to go with that fabulous picture you posted up there. So, the nutrition business, which I ran, sold IV solutions to hospital intensive care units. We'd make a liter of solution for $3 and sell it for $70. So we made a lot of money. But I went out into the marketplace, which was a bad habit I've had for a long time, and realized that this business was going to go away. Oops. So I needed a new opportunity. I found something. It was potential repositioning of the corporation. These next words should be a red flag. It may be something you should put on your tombstone. Nobody's done this before. So what was it? Well, I had worked at Baxter. I had learned about the kidney dialysis market. And at the time, there were 400,000 dialysis patients. Tragically, that number was growing like crazy. But 3 times a week, each of those individuals would show up at a dialysis center. There were 2,300 of them in the country. All of them were in a government document. So I knew where you were going to be Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. If your kidneys fail, since one of the things they do is help you eliminate fluids, you can't do what we also casually do. I believe the term is hydrate, because it's not uncommon for these patients to gain 8 to 10 pounds between Monday and Wednesday. So part of what dialysis does is wring that extra fluid out and get it back down. As a consequence, these patients are declared to be fluid restricted. But because of other things that your kidneys do for you, they also became clinically malnourished, and they were recommended to take nutrition supplements, all of which were liquids, Ensure, et cetera. So I had a very technical reaction to this, which was, duh. We should be able to do better than this. We should be able to come up with something that was high on what they needed and low on what they shouldn't have, and had no fluids. In other words, a nutrition bar. So we formulated it, we declared it Regain. We asked an ethical question: does it work? It's a food, not required to do clinical trials, but we did it anyway. Got the results published in a peer-reviewed journal. Bottom line, it works. So we knew, we'd all had pharmaceutical backgrounds. We knew that these patients see a doctor, they see a renal dietitian. We knew how to find the opinion leaders. So we asked them, would you recommend this? And they said, yeah. What percentage of your patients? All of them. How many days a week? 7. How do you feel about $3 a bar? Sounds perfect. How do you think we stack up next to the competition? Well, we don't have any. They're all liquids. So we pulled out our little calculators and said, geez, this is a pretty good business. Let's do it. So we brought the photographers in. We took the beauty shots of the product, developed a commission plan, hauled the sales force in, walked them through all that, went out into the market. And it was a complete disaster. So I was the author of a complete train wreck. We came in at less than 10% of what we forecast. What did I do wrong? Think about this, because all of you are presumably interested in entrepreneurship. I followed all the rules, fell flat on my face. So, yes, ma'am. I didn't do what? I didn't talk to the customer, and what was the rest of that? You don't think that the doctors and the dietitians were?
But you didn't talk to the person that's actually going to eat.
Did you guys hear that? We talk to the clinicians, but they don't buy it and they don't eat it. You can skip the rest of the course. When we finally talked to the patients, they didn't want it and they couldn't afford it. Why not? Yes, sir.
I'm thinking eating a bar as somebody who can't drink a lot of liquids is not very healthy.
That might have been true for 1 or 2% of them. It's not the fundamental reason. Yes?
Would insurance not cover it?
I'm sorry?
Would insurance not cover it, health insurance?
Well, hold that thought. I'm going to talk about Medicaid in a minute. That wasn't the fundamental reason. Yes, sir?
There was no control in the final price.
Reasonable guess. Wrong. Yes, ma'am.
I think because they weren't used to it. Like it disrupts also their whole lifestyle, or they decide like to live with it.
Also true, but there's something fundamental that we're missing here. Yes, sir? Last try. Okay. I was just saying there are two fundamental things. We thought it tasted pretty good, but it turns out if your kidneys fail, your palate shifts, and protein tastes like spoiled meat. Kind of disagreeable. And one of the things that they needed badly in this supplement was a lot of protein. Okay, the fundamental problem. Who gets kidney failure? And the answer is that 44% of them get there after a lifetime of mismanaging their high blood pressure, and 33% of them get there from a lifetime of mismanaging their diabetes. So 3/4 of my target customers had neglected their health for their whole life. They weren't going to change now. And once they ended up in a center being connected to a dialysis machine 3 times a day, some well-intended social worker would say, well, you poor thing, I'm clearly going to have to put you on public aid, so you don't have any money. And if you do have money, you're going to spend your $5 on beer and cigarettes, not on my product to improve your health. Fundamental flaw. We might have been able to get around the taste issues, the economic issues, et cetera, but the fundamental flaw was we had something that they needed, but they didn't want. There was one other problem. We had been selling this stuff to hospitals. Not this stuff. We'd been selling the clinical nutrition things I had to hospitals who would buy for the intensive care unit. For this, we had to sell to retail pharmacies, and they wouldn't carry it. Anybody care to guess why not?
Shelf space.
Say again?
Shelf space.
Shelf space. Tell me a little bit about that.
So depending on where your product sits on the shelf, it's more expensive. So if there's like the view is in the eye of the customer, then it's more expensive.
Okay, we're talking about planograms here, and I'm going to elaborate on that. You're getting real close. I couldn't figure this out. And one day, I guess I was standing in a pharmacy looking kind of pathetic. And this pharmacist came out and put his arm around my bony shoulders and said, Bob, come here. He said, you see this foot of shelf space? We have these algorithms that predict pretty accurately how much revenue we're going to make each month from this foot of shelf space. If I push those products off and put your product on, I can't think of any reason why I should lose money. This is called slotting fees. Another word for it is extortion. So don't go to any trouble. Just get out your checkbook. Well, those fees are onerous. Last time I did one of these with CVS, it was $1 million a quarter, plus 6% of your top line revenues, plus it was a guaranteed sale, meaning if it didn't sell, they'd ship it back to you for a full refund. I said, well, we can't do that. So, sidebar. We were on track to show Wall Street we were a good candidate for a public offering. And the IPO meant that the stock that the entrepreneur handed out was going to be worth something, and I was jeopardizing that. This did not make me popular. And we had these senior management team meetings once a month where we'd gather about the table and each of us would report on our business. And so they'd get to me and say, well, Bob, how's Regain doing? Let's see, you were supposed to do $400,000 this past month. How'd you do? 30. Excuse me? It's like a slow motion train wreck. And each month I'd say, well, we just underestimated how long it would take to get traction in the market, blah, 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 blah. Give us a little longer, and it didn't get any better. Well, I would like to think I'm a halfway smart guy, but this was terrible. Ruined a year of my life. So we learned about inside sales. We said, well, maybe we can find the 25% of people who didn't neglect their health their whole life. They were in a car accident or they got scarlet fever and they drive to the dialysis center in their expensive German car, and we can reach them. And maybe we can get Medicaid reimbursement. Medicaid, as you probably know, is run state by state. What do you think are the chances that Massachusetts and Connecticut have the same regs? Yeah. This is like 40 consecutive root canals. Said, well, this is a terrible way to make a living. We sold the business. Okay. Fast forward a little while. And as evidence that entrepreneurship is probably a triumph of persistence over common sense, I went off and did 2 more of these things and did a little bit better and got to know the docs that had started the nutrition division at Harvard Med School. And we launched a company. There's some funny stories about what happened between the first conversation and when we actually did it, and I moved to Boston. We haven't time for that this evening. Went through all their projects and said, well, all these things are going to take at least 3 years, and I'm too neurotic to babysit a bunch of scientists for 3 years. Let's do something else. How you guys feel about diabetes? I said, oh, we like diabetes. So let's go into diabetes. So this was some years ago now, and I must tell you that the technology has changed quite a lot, and that this product probably would not have succeeded would probably not succeed if we were to launch it today. So those of you who have family members or whatever familiar with diabetes, please don't yell at me that this is not true, because back then it was. When you have diabetes, you lose the ability to keep your blood glucose from going too high. The glucose stays in your bloodstream rather than being incorporated in the cells where it can actually do something useful. So a big chunk of the people who have diabetes use insulin to take the blood glucose down. If you do it right, you get it down to within a manageable bandwidth. If you do it wrong, it can drop too low. And if it goes too low, that's called hypoglycemia. And in just 2 bullets, most of the consequences of diabetes that we hear about come from having a continuously too high level of glucose. All right? And it leads to blindness, kidney failure, and amputation of your peripherals. So you lose your feet. It's bad. But it takes a while. Hypoglycemia, on the other hand, can cause you to faint on the spot. Bad if you're stuck in a traffic jam. And if it should happen while you are asleep, it's possible that you can find yourself in a coma. So, what happened most of the time was people adopted a system called tight controls. 3 small meals a day, 3 small snacks a day, regular modest injections of insulin, restrict the fluctuation. That system falls apart at night because nobody's going to wake themselves up 3 times a night to eat something and inject. So typically what they would do is eat a big nighttime snack, big injection of insulin, hope that the 2 would titrate across the evening, and it doesn't work because the food would all turn into glucose at the same time. So the spike would be higher, but the duration would be no longer. Translation, at 2 in the morning, the insulin's still working and the food's gone. That's the danger zone. Still with me? Yeah, okay. So we did all these little focus group things. Who knows what a focus group is? What's a focus group?
A group that you use to ask questions about the thing you're trying to find out about.
Typically, I would sit on the other side of a one-way glass. You'd be sitting there looking at what looks like a mirror, and I'm watching you, and the moderator's asking you questions. Theoretically, we learn about this. One day I had a temper tantrum and came out from behind the glass and said, let's knock off all the diplomacy here. You guys have been listening to this for close to an hour. Tell me what your greatest fear is. And they sort of stammered and said, I'm afraid I'll die in my sleep. I don't sleep in a bed anymore, Bob. I sleep in that like lazy boy in my living room because I'm afraid if I get too comfortable, I'll never wake up. I thought, That's gripping. So we put together a formulation of ingredients: sucrose, protein, and uncooked cornstarch, which is probably in a birthday cake. But if you use those ingredients and say diabetes, you're violating my patent. It tasted good, your question. We gave it a non-medical name and non-medical packaging. Why did we do that? No, it was not a legal question. Good guess, but not right. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry? Almost.
It's allowing them to kind of appreciate a more normal piece of life.
You're getting real close.
Say how they're perceived by others.
Bullseye. What they would say to me is, Bob, I don't think of myself as a person with diabetes. I'm an investment banker. I'm a lawyer. You get migraines. You've got lactose allergies. I've got diabetes. It's nobody's business. And if I should need this while I'm stuck in a really long meeting, I don't want anybody else in the meeting thinking I'm medicating. That's none of their business. So, whoa. At the time, I was arm wrestling with the FDA. I wanted to be able to say on the product for people with diabetes. And a couple of them said, Bob, if you do that, I won't buy the product. I was working very hard to do something that would have killed the business. So we said, well, what should it look like? And they said, well, make it look like something that an elite athlete, marathon runner or something would consume. And actually, we ended up selling a reasonable amount of this to marathon runners. So this go around, we got involved with clinicians, parents, because we thought at the time that our customers were going to be kids with type 1 diabetes. So we went off to a whole bunch of the Juvenile Diabetes Foundation meetings where we'd sit in an elementary school in those chairs that were about half this high. You feel like Baby Huey and those little desks and so forth, and listen to the parents. We got to know a pile of parents. And we learned that their biggest concern was, is our kid asleep? Or is she in a coma? And every night at 2 a.m, they'd say, you okay? Wake up. And she'd say, yeah, I was asleep. Oh, good, go back to sleep. And it sounds comical, but it wasn't. Because all you need is to have the EMTs come to your house once to revive your child from a coma, and you never forget it. Now, we learned that by essentially living with these parents. And then eventually, of course, we realized actually it's not just kids, it's anybody who injects insulin. We picked an ad agency that knew the field. And at the time, most people looked at a magazine called Diabetes Forecast. And I said, well, what do the ads look like in that? And picked up a couple copies. And the back cover, prime real estate, full-page blow-ups of hypodermic needles. The copy would essentially say, my needle's sharper than his needle and it'll hurt less. I thought, well, that's really appealing. So we put in a big ad that featured flying pigs with some kind of lame copy about to sleep perchance to dream, one bite and the rest is easy, etc. And we started getting calls. Call 1-800-NIGHT-BITE. And at 100 calls a day, we were at 238 Main Street, sharing an office with a couple of other companies, kind of a ratty little office in a ratty little building when Kendall Square was still ratty. 100 calls a day, we said, geez, we need more phones. 200 calls a day, we said, oh my God, we need somebody to answer the phone. So we'd go out into Kendall Square and we'd say, hold your wrist for a second. Okay, you have a pulse. Would you like a job? And we were kind of indiscriminate, but we knew there were more geniuses per square foot in Kendall Square than most places. 300 calls a day, we said, oh my God, we better get a database in here. 500 calls a day, we had to start renting tables and chairs and computers and setting all that stuff up. But we might be onto something. We hired an inside sales force. And to take you all the way to the end of the story for the moment, we ended up in every major pharmacy chain in the country, and the slotting fees we paid, $0. Never been done. And if you look really hard, you'll find that there's an obscure Harvard Business School case study on us, because this was unprecedented. So the lesson, of course, understanding our customer helped us invent a better product and help build a successful business. Now, if I haven't put you completely to sleep, you should be wondering, how do we do this? So we said, well, let's be brutally honest here. A fair percentage of people who have diabetes got there because they didn't take care of themselves. And an even smaller percentage of those people are actually spending money to take care of themselves. And though it may sound harsh, we need to reach the people who might spend money to buy what we have to sell. How do we find them? And when we do find them, who do they trust? Turned out there's a credential called Certified Diabetes Educator. This is a credential you pick up after being a pharmacist or a dietitian or a nurse. You typically work around the major metropolitan areas. You can charge more. They have an organization, surprisingly enough, called the American Association of Diabetes Educators. And on their website is a tab that says locate an educator, and you type in 02142 and out comes all the people you might want to talk to with all their contact information. So we hired a team, monitored them, trained them, paid them, and we ended up with several thousand highly credentialed healthcare professionals who became our sales force for free. Well, how'd we do that? Turned out that these diabetes educators typically have a meeting one Saturday a month. They bring their patients in. They talk about what's new in the marketplace, how are you doing, et cetera. So we called some of them up, the educators, and we said, what's your biggest professional frustration? What do you think they said? Well, they said more than you're saying. You have a healthy, thriving practice, but your life isn't perfect. What's your biggest professional frustration? I can't believe I've stumped this many smart people. Yes, sir?
Patients don't follow instructions.
Bullseye. Patients won't follow instructions. The way they said it was, I tell them what to do and they don't do it. The fancy term for which is compliance. We said, well, what if we told you that a bunch of snotty doctors at Harvard, is that redundant? Ooh, burn. What if we told you that some esteemed clinicians developed something that works, tastes great, your patients will love it, and they will thank you for telling them about it? They said, oh, well, I'd probably want to have your babies. I don't want no more babies. But how would you react? Well, we'd love it. And we ended up, now mind you, we would have offended these folks if we had offered them money because they're healers. But what we offered them was something that they really wanted, right? We delivered something to them that their patients would actually take, which would improve their health. Compensation is more than just cash. Keep that in mind when we talk about hiring and firing at some point. Okay, so we said, well, you probably send your patients to a local pharmacy. May we tell the pharmacist about this? In fact, would you tell the pharmacist about this? Why, yes, I would. Pharmacists would agree to take the product. No mention of slotting fees. What gave us that negotiating power? What did we have? The title of my talk is Finding Your Customer. Okay, get out your branding iron, put that on your forearm. Okay, so the selling flow chart for a while was we'd call the educators, they'd tell the patients would buy from us. And we wouldn't make much money. But we said if we got to the retailers, we'd sell more. Now, if you ever want to have a good laugh, you ever watched a pharmacist answer the phone? Pharmacy. You got about 12 seconds. You should also know that about 3% of the patients in the country have diabetes, and they're worth almost 25% of pharmacy purchases. Because you buy toothpaste and greeting cards. If you have diabetes, you're in there buying glucose monitors, strips, insulin, etc. High-value patients. So what did we say in our 12 seconds? Hi, I've been selling our product to about a dozen of your patients. They'd rather buy it from you and you don't have it. Can I help you with this problem? Wait, what? Who is this? That's called permission to continue. So, in sales parlance. So once oftentimes the pharmacist would say, well, look, we're Walgreens, we're a big chain. I can't possibly buy anything without corporate approval. I'd say, yeah, we know that. But we also suspect that there's a threshold below which you can buy without corporate permission. And we're guessing that it's $100. Well, actually, yes, that's true. You'll be pleased to know that our starter kit costs $99.95. And if it doesn't sell, we'll take your word for it. You don't have to ship it back to us. Throw it in the dumpster. We'll send you a refund. No risk. Well, all right, I'll take a purchase order, please. And then we would call the consumers that we knew were using that pharmacy and said, we just wanted to let you know that Hadzima's Pharmacy is now stocking this stuff. And since our records indicate you're about out, and you're probably also going to be buying your insulin soon, make sure you pick it up while you're there. We'd wait about a week or 10 days, call the pharmacy, and we'd say, we just want to make sure that you got that night bite we sent you, because just because we sent it doesn't mean you got it. And they'd say, well, hold on a minute, let me go check. Oh my God, it's already sold out. We'd say, imagine that. Wouldn't you like a standing order? Nobody ever mentioned slotting fees because we were delivering what to them? Customers, thank you. Who knows what an SKU is? What is it? I'm sorry, if I can't hear you, I know they can't hear you. Stock keeping unit, what does that mean? You ever tried to buy Crest toothpaste? They have Crest toothpaste if you're left-handed, Crest toothpaste if you have red hair, and the product differentiation has gotten ridiculous. Each of those is a separate SKU. The average CVS has about 8,000 SKUs. They do not want 8,000 invoices. So they work through something called a wholesaler, who puts all that stuff in big Tupperware bins and delivers it all at once and gives CVS one invoice. Makes sense, right? After a while, the pharmacist said, all right, look, we give up. You guys have got something here. It's moving. You're bringing us patients with diabetes. You're driving us crazy. You got to get into the wholesalers. Okay, if you think the retail pharmacist doesn't care much about your health care, compare that to wholesalers. This, by the way, turns out to be a new definition of our customer. So if you're following along, our first customers were diabetes educators, eventually patients. Our second customers were retailers, and our third customer was wholesalers. So at each stage in growing our company, we changed our definition of customer, right? Part of how we evolved. Well, I'm going to skip telling you how we did this because We have other stuff to cover, but I will tell you one funny story. We got an honest-to-God piece of postal mail with a stamp on it from a retail pharmacy chain headquartered in Florida. And they said, if you want to be in our planogram for the coming year, you have to attend a 15-minute meeting in Clearwater, Florida. Who knows what a planogram is? I know you do, don't tell us. In the back, yes, sir.
Basically a layout of the shelf of where each SKU goes.
That's exactly right. If they've done it right, every time you walk into a CVS, the aisles are configured pretty much the same way. If you end up visiting Walmart in No Place, Arkansas, they have a building about the size of Building 10 where they assess planograms. They've got them, which item should be at eye level, your point, which one should be down here, all of that stuff, right? It's something of a science. If you don't get on the planogram, you're not in the pharmacy for that year. They said a 15-minute meeting in Clearwater, Florida. So I asked around and I said, who would we be talking to? And they said, you'll be talking to Jeff. Well, tell me about Jeff. Jeff has a job that you don't want. He's got to sit there for a week and listen to one 15-minute presentation after another from feverish vendors who really want him to stock their product. I said, how's Jeff compensated? They said, Jeff is compensated based on how much money he can extort from these vendors. I said, well, this should be entertaining because we don't have any money. But I'm feeling pugnacious. Let's do it. So we went to Clearwater, Florida, and when we walked into the big lobby of this pharmacy chain, it was like visiting Cirque du Soleil or something. There were people sitting there with end-cap mock-ups and people who were coming in saying, I'll pick up your dry cleaning and walk your dog. Please take my product. And the two of us are sitting there with a briefcase. So when our 15 minutes came, I said, Jeff, this isn't going to be like the other talks you've been listening to this week because we don't have any money and we're not going to give you a nickel. But I'd like to spend 5 minutes telling you who we are, 5 minutes telling you what our product is, and 5 minutes telling you why you want us anyway. And he said, well, it's your 15 minutes, sport. Knock yourself out. So the first 10 minutes were pretty much what you'd expect, right? We're so fabulous and all that. The last 5 minutes, I started pulling sheets of paper out of the briefcase. I said, these are the customers that are in this, that we're doing business with that are in the states where you have stores. There's 10,000 of them. And I'm tired of being in the shipping business. I don't want to do it anymore. All 10,000 of these customers are asking us, which pharmacy chain can I go to buy this product? How would you like us to answer their question? And he sat there for about a minute, didn't say a word. And by the way, if you don't think a minute's a long time, hold your breath. At the end of the minute, he said, okay, you're in. Yes. Nary a word about slotting fees. Because we were proposing to deliver to him. Thank you. I essentially said, look, I'm not going to pay you to find these customers. I did that already. I'm going to pay you your fair share of the retail markup that you get. But I did the homework. And they went for it. So we grew the business. We had a reorder rate that was astonishing. Monsanto did a survey of our customers and found that our average customer bought our product 286 times a year, which is staggering. And if people buy your business based on discounted value of future earnings, that's an annuity, right? Your future earnings are pretty well assured. So we got a bunch of publicity. We sold it to a $1 billion pharmaceutical firm. Good story. So I've stood up here and publicly embarrassed myself by telling you about my complete disaster. and told you a little bit about one that went a bit better. So, I hope I've learned a few lessons. I'd like you to help me summarize. What should I have learned from all of this, particularly given that I'm still in the throes of a startup, and you may be involved in some as well. Yes, ma'am.
Never ever forget about
Never ever forget,
your customer. About your customer, like your final user.
never ever forget who is your customer. Good. What else? What else should I have learned? Yes, ma'am.
Start with customer discovery and figure out what the problem is and make sure that your product actually solves the pain for them.
Oh my God. Instant A, Joe? Would you repeat that perhaps a little louder so that those folks can hear you? That was great.
I said start with customer discovery and figure out what the pain point for your customer is, and then make sure your product solves that pain or gets rid of it.
So this may seem pedestrian to you, but think about you're selling pain relief. Your prospective customer's got a pain, and they may reach for that bottle of Tylenol, or they may reach for your solution. What's the pain, and how are you going to relieve their pain? What else should I have learned? Well, let's list a couple of them. Know what they're really buying. I want to elaborate on that in a minute. I think this is called positioning. If we say, who's this for? And you say, everybody, conversation's over. Because the products for everybody aren't for anybody. All right? You've got to pare that down. And face it, nobody needs what you're proposing to sell. They might want the benefits. I'm wearing glasses. I don't need the glasses. I need to see better. I hired glasses. Some of you hired contact lenses, and I bet you know somebody who hired the surgeon to do the LASIK surgery. Right? All of us have the same unmet need. We want to see better, right? This sounds simple, and forgive me, I don't mean to be bombastic, but I think it's profound. Identify the underlying need. And when you talk about your business, sell the benefits first. Then give them a reason to believe. We've invented a glucose monitor that will allow you to test your blood glucose without having to stick a needle in your finger 4 times a day and bleed on a strip. Most investors would say, oh my God, tell me more, right? And eventually they'll say, how do I know it works? But if you come in the front door talking about your technology, I agree with Joe, technology is not a section. Okay, if you were to ask me, what do I want you to remember from tonight's talk? If there were one thing, it would be this next slide. First, who can tell us what market segmentation is? That looked kind of tentative.
It was.
All right, you are feeling brave anyway? What's market segmentation?
Would it be applying your knowledge of, okay, this many people have kidney failure, but only this percentage are looking to improve their health, and this percentage has a different priority?
That's not wrong, but it's a little cumbersome. So who else would like to take a crack at this? Yes, sir.
A way to differentiate one customer from another potential customer.
Let's say I have invented a pair of scissors for people who are left-handed. How valuable would it be to go pursuing people who are right-handed? Instant market segmentation, right? Are you right-handed? Yes. Then you don't need what I've got. How about you? All right? It's a way of dividing your customers up. Now, I can tell by the silence and the deer in the headlights look that I'm seeing from some of you that you don't have a lot of experience here. So I'm going to ask the question, but I bet you don't know the answer. What are the typical ways of segmenting a group of customers?
Sometimes
Okay, she said demographics. I don't know what that has too many syllables. What's that mean?
So it could be like based on like age or gender, could be based on like education or just based on things that.
Good. So if Procter & Gamble says, we'd like to reach women between the ages of 25 and 40 with an average household income north of $80,000 a year, preferably college educated. That's a traditional way of market segmentation, right? Age, education, disposable income, maybe geography. I will argue that for you, that's wrong. Yes, ma'am. You got a question, or are you going to volunteer an augmented answer? Attitudes and behaviors, psychographics, as they're often called. Yep, that can be layered on here as well. Shows a predisposition to clean the house 4 times a week, also known as obsessive-compulsive disorder. I will argue that for you trying to start a company, the most important axis is motivation. So let's say that we've worked together to invent something that will prevent you having a second heart attack. If you had your first heart attack and you didn't survive, you're not our customer. But if you did, you're feeling the pain right now. If you're the one with the heart attack, you're her sister. You might say, well, gosh, we've got the same DNA, the same family tree, etc. I'm worried. Relatives, coworkers say, well, we liked her, and it was just terrible that she had this heart attack. We'll be a little bit vigilant. But over and over again, people look down here and say, that's where the mass is in the market. We'd be nuts to go anyplace else. And with respect, I disagree. I think it's a graveyard. I think you can't afford to convert the people who are not true believers already. And maybe more to the point, if you can't succeed up at the top, you know your business idea is a dud. Shoot it, have another idea. Make sense? All right, so my view, segment your prospective marketplace according to motivation. And by the way, if you want to change people's buying habits, meaning get them to buy something they haven't bought before, that's tough. Things that motivate people are pain, fear, greed, vanity. But virtue, my vitamin pill will cause your doctor to tell you, congratulations, your B12 profile improved. That's a tough sell. So what was I selling with that first product, the one that flopped? I was selling virtue. Their only reward was the doc would tell them every 6 months, congratulations, your blood chemistries are better. What was I selling with Nightbite? Security. I was addressing fear. A pretty profound fear, dying in my sleep, right? My early slide, I said your business won't prosper until you understand what I'm really selling. This is what I'm talking about. I was trying to sell virtue, it failed. When I tried to sell pain relief and fear, it succeeded.
What's the current business, the sleep thing?
Well, I'm going to give you a little rant about that in just a minute. Hold that thought. It's a great question. All right. How many of you are marketing majors? Oh, that's too bad. All right, for the rest of you, there are all manner of sophisticated courses one can take in marketing. If you haven't the time nor the patience, I'm going to give it to you, the whole thing, 2 steps. Figure out what your customer wants, give it to them. And that sounds like I'm making a joke. And there are all manner of multivariable analyses, et cetera, that one can conduct. And they're sophisticated and arguably necessary. But if you get lost in the weeds and forget these 2 points, not going to work. Ask them what they want, provide it to them. Okay, let's talk a little bit about launch markets. Because a lot of people have a product and they look, or a service, and they look and say, well, the real opportunity is here because it's big. Yes, but can you afford to go there right away? So, with what I'm doing, sure, I could have gone after insomniacs, menopausal women, business travelers. There's a whole long list of people, market segments, if you will, that are having trouble sleeping. But the one I could reach right away that was quite willing to pay and not price sensitive were performance-oriented athletes. So where I started isn't where I'm going to end up, but I got to start where I can pay the bills. So do you. I had a boss that said this to me, and I never forgave him for it because I couldn't get it out of my head. He said, Jones, there is no hocus pocus that takes the place of focus. I said, God, make him stop. But it stuck with me all these years, and it's true. So instead of promoting your product, find your customer. Remember that they hire products and services to do a job. Design your product to do a job for a particular kind of customer and go find them. So how do you do that? Well, you got to talk to them. Now, many of you are enormously more adept at social media than I am. But when I launched Food for Sleep, we need packaging. What's it going to look like? What's the brand premise? Well, you should do that knowing who your customer is. This was a chicken and egg question. We didn't know who our customers were. We said, well, we got to start somewhere. We're entrepreneurs. We'll figure it out. This is my brief rant. So we said, well, it's probably working moms because they're overworked, overscheduled, overcaffeinated, fussy shoppers, like things with food in them rather than something that says diphenhydramine. Let's go after them. So I spent months getting to know that population. I identified a group of bloggers that were associated with something called Type A Parent Boot Camp. I went to their meeting. There were 100 people there. One of them was male. Talk about an out-of-body experience. Sidebar. Women talk differently when there are no men around. I ended up thinking, and I shouldn't be hearing this conversation. Sidebar. Anyway, we sent out some stuff to 100,000 women, shopped at Whole Foods, opted in to get this kind of mailing, et cetera, et cetera. We were shipping the product ourselves at the time. We weren't making any money, but I wanted the information. Almost nobody bought. Why not? Yeah, I didn't know either. Finally, a couple of them pulled me aside and said, Bob, we just don't spend any money on ourselves. We'll spend a fortune on our children, $2 on our husband. We don't spend any money on ourselves. And every working mom I've spoken to has said, oh, of course, that's absolutely right. There was a small group that continued to buy and continued to reorder. And because we had their contact information, I called them up. Hi, this is Bob. I make that stuff you've been buying. I love you. Why are you buying my stuff? And in the constellation of answers, every one of them said, I run marathons. And it helps me recover, and it's improved my performance if I get good sleep. Moms who run. Well, come to think of it, why can't it be moms who do CrossFit, moms who do triathlon? Come to think of it, why can't it just be athletes? Massive repositioning. Okay, we had sensitive packaging, Tom's of Maine, nice note for me, made with love, all that stuff. No, we're chasing warriors. Right? Enough of that, we're chasing warriors. More Nike, less Tom's of Maine. Complete repositioning. I would have died of old age trying to smoke that out via social media. Trying different offers, different prices, different copy. Call them up. Ask them. Ask them what they want. Give it to them. So far, so good? You have a question? You have a question.
Yeah, so when you found out your customer base were now athletes, did you ever think of going to trade shows with your product to see if, to test that market? Like,
Oh, absolutely.
media or,
Oh, I ran a social media campaign, shut it down after day 4. I shut it down because I realized even when I succeed, I'm getting one customer at a time. But if I convert the coach at Ohio State, I'll get about 600 customers. I'm looking for leverage. So I started saying, well, who influences these people? Is it the athletic director? Is it the medical department? Who is it? Well, the athletic director is essentially a political position dealing with rich alumni who want to know how come Junior's sitting on the bench instead of out on the field. Medical department waits until you've broken something and then they fix it. Turned out it was a strength and conditioning coach. So I got to know some strength and conditioning coaches, including some tough customers. So I got to know the fellow that was the strength and conditioning coach for the San Antonio Spurs for 17 years. Those of you who follow basketball, they won 5 NBA titles during his tenure. And he would not have hesitated to tell me that this was crap, if that's what he thought. Funny sidebar, I also got to know a fellow who's north of Boston who has worked with the Celtics, the Bruins, the Red Sox, the Revolution, and buffed up Ben Affleck for his past couple of Batman movies. Piece of work, this guy. So I spent a lot of time with those folks. And I went in and I said, if you think this is junk, you'll do me a great favor by telling me right now, or in 2 weeks after you've evaluated it. You'll save me years and a lot of money. And they said, well, that's not exactly a sales pitch. No, I'm not here to sell. I want your honest opinion. So they kept journals and all. It works. Well, what do you think about that? Well, I want you to call my friend who's the coach at Holy Cross and et cetera. Marketers call that net promoter score, right? So this requires a little subtlety. And many of us break out in hives at the thought of actually talking face-to-face with the customer. But it takes a little art. Because somebody once asked Henry Ford, Henry, did you ever ask your customers what they want? And he said, hell, if I asked them what they want, they would have said faster horses. So Henry's genius was in figuring out that's called a car. So it takes a little subtlety to hear what they're saying and figure out what's behind it. All right, back on this just for a second. If I'm selling better sleep, if you buy one of those white noise generators, you're my competition. If you bought a fancy pillow, you're my competition. All right? Anything that people are spending money on to meet this unmet need is your competition. Okay. If you can't communicate your product benefits within seconds, you're toast. Part of why I subjected our 2 brave volunteers to 60 seconds this evening. So, I would like to open this up to a few more brave volunteers in our final minutes of the class who would like to come down here, tell us a little bit about their business, get the combined wisdom of the audience in terms of feedback. Come on. What's your name? First name?
D.
D? Okay. Let's give D a hand, please. Here are the rules. We don't owe her love. We do owe her respect. She's brave. She's down here and you aren't. We're going to give her a minute, maybe 90 seconds, to tell us a little bit about the business. And we're going to ask you what's broke that you fix, who's got this unmet need, and why they will find what you have to be better. Everybody got that? So,
how many of you here are non-technical founders? Okay, so what I'm working on is specifically focused on non-technical founders who are on a budget and they want to take their product live. It could be a web app or a mobile app. The biggest problem is where do you get it made, because you don't have a tech co-founder, because probably that's not in your network. And if you get it made locally, it might cost you $30,000, $50,000, etc., and it's a lot of money. So you're looking for a reliable source to make it for you, but you just don't have the money. So this is where the service which I've come up with is focused on. Outsourcing tech development to a team that I have built in India, which does reliable coding of web apps and mobile apps for non-technical founders in an affordable budget with transparent and reliable and timely communication. And I have a partner office here, which basically takes care of all, which kind of like looks at the trust and the trust issue. So you know that your money is safe and it's going in a good direction. So it's a new initiative. We started around 4 months back, and we've served around 12 founders in Silicon Valley. I started it as a pilot, and these people are coming back because they want to, go to the next milestones.
Ding.
So, yep.
Let's give her a hand.
Thank you.
Okay. Stay right there.
Yeah.
Well, what kind of feedback can you provide her? Do you know what her business is? Do you know who her customer is? Do you know what the unmet need is? Somebody? Go.
Her business is technical expertise, and your customer is people who want to have some type of digital presence, and it doesn't sound very sustainable.
A little piece of feedback. All right, you were going to offer a thought?
I think it was pretty much what he was going to say. How are you going to increase revenue?
So far,
Don't answer that. Hold that thought for a second. This is just a piece of feedback from the audience. So we've got a capture of what her business is. We have an open question, which is how's she going to grow the business?
I thought it was pretty clear what you're trying to solve, and I think it's a problem that a lot of us have, so it seemed compelling. I think from a pitch perspective, a little bit more on the business model, how you guys make money. It's clear that you obviously charge or mark up on whatever you're paying people in India, but it would be good to get a little bit of the unit economics in a pitch like this.
Who's her customer?
New venture founders.
Do they have any money?
I mean, a little bit. They have some budget, maybe, and it's designed to be cheap, a cheap alternative to what's out there. So.
Okay, and one more, yes.
I have a bunch of feedback. One, isn't this a smaller version of Wipro? Like, once you grow, you will be Wipro, right? So it's more like a consultancy firm that is small today. Two, if you want to save cost, instead of outsourcing, why don't you actually get these apps made by students who are in undergraduate degrees? Because students need money, and they have the skills to do what you want them to do.
All right, let me restate that. What he's suggesting is that in your pitch, you should include an understanding as to why you've chosen to outsource it to India rather than deal with starving but brilliant students who would be quite capable of doing as good a job for short money. All right? Okay, let's give her a hand, please, for being so brave. Nice job. You're welcome. I think if you guys are willing to indulge us maybe 2 or 3 minutes past the deadline, we have room for one more. Would somebody else like to take a crack at this? No? All right, then let's just, we do have somebody. Muhammad. All right, Muhammad approached me on the break. He doesn't actually have his name on his forehead. So. Let's see, by the way, if you've refined your pitch since in the last 90 minutes. All right, take it away. Huh?
What were the questions?
What were my questions? What's broke that you fix? Who's got this unmet need? Why is your solution better? And if you have time, how are you going to make any money?
Yep. So actually, came here 5 minutes before the event started to decide to figure out if I can get enough information to see if I should go and build this business with a couple of friends. We finished a hackathon 12 hours ago. So you put on the VR set, you make a training module. Training module breaks down what your activity is in steps, and you label which activities you need for each current step. Once you do that, that module gets passed on to the student or the worker. Worker puts it on, walks them through the steps in a hands-free way. You're able to interact with machinery and also have the overhead display show you the activity. Who is this for? These leaving workforce with specialized skills in manufacturing and production, and you're able to transfer that knowledge into the incoming market. How are we going to sell money? We sell the platform that will enable anybody to service it, and we're hoping to license.
Okay, let's give him a hand. Stand by a second. So, who's his customer? Yeah, I don't know either. What's broke that he fixes? What's the unmet need that he's addressing? I'm sorry, who's that?
Knowledge transfer between new employees.
Knowledge transfer. Who's going to pay for that? I'm not being disdainful. I'm simply saying when you make a pitch, there are some fundamental things that you need to address right up front, because every astute audience is going to ask some pretty basic questions. So, Mohammed, there may well be an unmet need here. Given that you just walked out of a hackathon, I'm willing to stipulate, as the lawyers say, that you've got a technology that's better. You may have a solution in search of a problem. But to be continued. Let's give him a hand. Thank you. That's it. All right. Next week on Tuesday night, I am going to subject you to another 90 minutes of me, my sympathies. The topic will be presenting your venture, and in at least part of it, I'm going to talk a little bit about the right way to use one of these things. Because I've seen a number of presentations fall flat on their face because nobody could hear you. But let me wrap this up. Your final questions is, where do my customers go for help and advice? How will I reach them? Who's my first customer? How do I know they're going to be willing to pay for the product? Will they buy enough? Who is responsible for sales? It takes a particularly warped personality to enjoy this. But you need to find one of those and have them on your team. And I'm afraid if you have any questions, we're out of time. Kidding, I'll stay around for a few minutes. So let me summarize. The only non-negotiable requirement is customers. If it's going to succeed, your business has to provide something that's unique and important, not generally, but to someone. So figure out who wants your stuff, find them, take their money. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Well, a lot to think about there. Tomorrow, we're going to have business models. So you found a customer, or how are you going to make money? How are you going to transform that value you created into something that makes it sustainable? That'll be the first part of the evening, and then Yost will talk to us about organization and people issues in the second half. So hopefully see you tomorrow. Thank you for coming.